Some crimes don't just end in tragedy, they unravel with turns no one could imagine. Behind closed doors and quiet neighborhoods, lives collapse in ways more chilling than fiction. These are the stories where fate turned cruel, and every new revelation pulled the world deeper into shock and horror. It all began like a mystery straight out of a crime thriller. On May 24, 2019, a wealthy mother of 5, Jennifer Dulos, suddenly disappeared after dropping her kids at school. For hours, no one knew where she had gone. Friends grew anxious when she failed to show up for scheduled appointments, and by evening, the alarm bells rang louder. Police were called, and the search began immediately. At first, it looked like a missing persons case, but soon, investigators realized that this was no ordinary disappearance. It was the beginning of one of the darkest and most shocking true crime stories of the decade. As days passed, detectives uncovered troubling evidence. In her garage, they found bloodstains and clear signs of a violent struggle. It became increasingly hard to believe that Jennifer had simply walked away from her life. Within weeks, the case shifted from a search for a missing woman to a full-blown homicide investigation. But there was still one major problem. Jennifer's body was nowhere to be found. Then came the first twist. Surveillance footage revealed a man driving a pickup truck late at night, making multiple stops to dump garbage bags in different locations. When those bags were recovered, they contained bloody clothing, sponges, and cleaning supplies. DNA tests confirmed that the blood belonged to Jennifer. The man driving the truck was identified as none other than her estranged husband, Fotis Dulos. The shocking part was how Fotis had managed to maintain a facade for so long. To the public, he appeared calm and even gave interviews proclaiming his innocence. He said he had nothing to do with his wife's disappearance and that he loved his children. But behind the mask of confidence, a darker truth was beginning to surface. Investigators dug deeper and found that Jennifer had filed for divorce 2 years earlier, citing fears for her safety. She claimed Fotis was controlling and had threatened her in the past. Their custody battle was bitter and ongoing, with Fotis fighting desperately to maintain control. To many, it became clear that Jennifer's vanishing was not random at all. It was the ultimate act of domestic violence. Another chilling twist came when Fotis's girlfriend, Michelle Traconis, was accused of helping him cover up the crime. She allegedly rode with him in the truck and assisted in disposing of evidence. Even more disturbing, police later discovered that Fotis had borrowed his employee's truck on the very day Jennifer disappeared, trying to disguise his movements. But perhaps the darkest turn was yet to come. In January 2020, as Fotis was awaiting trial for murder, he attempted to take his own life. He left behind a note proclaiming his innocence, insisting he had nothing to do with Jennifer's death. Days later, he died in the hospital, never facing a jury. With his death, many answers died with him. Jennifer's body has never been found, and her family continues to live with the pain of not having closure. The case of Jennifer Dulos remains one of the most haunting examples of how love, trust, and family life can hide unimaginable darkness. A woman vanished, her blood told the story of her final moments, and the man who once vowed to protect her became the prime suspect in her death. It's a reminder that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are not strangers in the night, but those closest to us. But Jennifer's case is just one glimpse into the haunting world of dark crime. If you thought this was disturbing, wait until you hear about a father who did the unthinkable to his own family, leaving the world horrified in ways no one could have imagined. It was a cold November night in Moscow, Idaho. On November 13th, 2022, 4 University of Idaho students, Kaylee Gonkovs, Madison Mogan, Zana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin, were brutally killed inside their off-campus house. The victims were young, full of life, and known for their bright futures. That morning, the quiet college town woke up to a nightmare that would send shockwaves across the nation. At first, details were scarce. The house showed no signs of forced entry. Two other roommates, sleeping in different parts of the home, were left unharmed. The killings were brutal, carried out with a knife in the middle of the night while the victims slept or fought for their lives. Fear spread quickly across campus. Students stopped attending classes, many returned home, and the community demanded answers. But the biggest question remained: who could do something so horrific? For weeks, investigators seemed to be chasing shadows. The police department released very little information, fueling rumors and speculation online. Thousands of internet sleuths tried to piece together clues, but the case remained unsolved. The small town was gripped by fear, unsure if a killer was still lurking among them. Then came the breakthrough. Surveillance cameras near the crime scene captured a white Hyundai Elantra passing by the house multiple times during the night of the murders. Investigators tracked the vehicle across states until it led them to a suspect, Bryan Kohberger, a 28-year-old criminology PhD student at Washington State University, just a few miles away from the Idaho campus. The twist was chilling. Coberger wasn't just any suspect. He was studying criminal justice and criminology, specifically how killers think and act. He had written online surveys asking convicted criminals to describe their emotions and decision-making during crimes. The very man obsessed with understanding murder had now become the prime suspect in one of the most shocking killings in recent years. When police arrested him at his parents' house in Pennsylvania, the community was stunned. How could someone training to become a criminal expert also be accused of being a murderer? Even more disturbing, phone records showed Coberger's phone had pinged near the victim's house multiple times in the weeks before the murders, suggesting he may have been stalking them. In June 2025, before the trial could begin, Bryan Kohberger pleaded guilty to all 4 murders. On July 23, 2025, he was sentenced to 4 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 10 years in prison. Along with prison time, he was ordered to pay financial penalties and restitution. Prosecutors called the DNA on the knife sheath the key evidence that sealed the case, and his guilty plea finally ended months of uncertainty for the victims' families. The Idaho College murders remain a grim reminder that evil can hide in plain sight. The students' lives were cut short in the place they felt safest, their own home. And the accused was someone who should have understood crime from an academic lens, not through bloodshed. The tragedy continues to haunt the nation as families and friends of the victims wait for justice to be served. It began on a quiet summer morning in Frederick, Colorado. On August 13, 2018, Shanann Watts, a 34-year-old mother who was 15 weeks pregnant, suddenly vanished along with her 2 young daughters, Bella, 4, and Celeste, 3. Shanann's friend grew worried when she missed a doctor's appointment and didn't answer her phone. Soon after, police were called to check on the family. The house was empty. Shanann's car was still in the garage. Her purse, keys, and phone were inside. It looked like she had simply disappeared into thin air. At first, everyone hoped for the best, that maybe Shanann had gone to a friend's place or taken the girls on an unplanned trip. But suspicion began to rise almost immediately. Detectives noticed that Shanann's husband, Chris Watts, seemed unusually calm. Instead of panicking, he gave casual interviews on live television, pleading for his wife and children to come back. To outsiders, it looked like the act of a concerned husband. But investigators sensed something was terribly off. Within days, the truth began to unravel. Chris claimed he had no idea where Shanann and the children were, but his story kept changing. When police checked security footage from a neighbor's camera, they noticed Chris backing his truck into the garage early that morning, loading it up with something. It wasn't long before detectives confronted him with the evidence. Under pressure, Chris finally confessed, but the confession came with a chilling twist. He admitted to killing his wife Shanann in their home. But what horrified investigators even more was that he had also taken the lives of his 2 little girls. Instead of showing remorse, Chris coldly explained how he strangled Shanann during an argument, then smothered his daughters. He transported their bodies in his work truck to a remote oil site owned by his company. There, he buried Shanann in a shallow grave and placed his daughters' bodies inside massive oil tanks. The brutality of the crime shocked the world. Chris Watts had seemed like the perfect family man on social media, smiling in photos, playing with his kids, and appearing devoted to his wife. But behind the happy facade was a chilling double life. Investigators later discovered that Chris was having an affair with a coworker and wanted to start fresh without the burden of his family. Instead of choosing divorce, he chose murder. Even darker was the revelation that Shanann had sensed danger long before. Friends later shared that she had confided in them about Chris growing distant and cold. Yet, no one could have imagined the scale of violence he was capable of. On November 19, 2018, Chris Watts was sentenced to 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole. He avoided the death penalty by confessing and accepting a plea deal. He now spends the rest of his life in prison, locked away as one of the most notorious family annihilators in modern history. The Chris Watts case remains one of the most haunting examples of how appearances can deceive. A man who smiled for the camera, who appeared to love his children, turned out to be their executioner. A loving mother and 2 innocent girls lost their lives not to a stranger, but to the one person who was supposed to protect them above all.